Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it's an honor to bring in a cat who's been improvising melodically for quite some time in all different types of genres. He seems to have gotten the memo and has become educated in a street way about the origins of diaspora in our country, and ultimately how this form of the only American art form of jazz, was cultivated here. He has a bunch of new albums out during this time. Seems like creativity is constantly bubbling out of him, and looking forward to getting into it. Stephen Bernstein, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake Feinberg. I also love the title of your show because it gets right to the point.
Thank you, brother. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, to younger cats especially, about when you basically, said, you know what, I'm done giving away this stuff for free. Music is not my gift to the world, even though I love doing it and I could spend all day doing it. I'm not going to pay to play. I'm not going to play for the door. I'd like you to talk about how you advocated for your art and commodified your art.
Well, you have to understand the generation I came up with. I mean, I was playing professional gigs in high school. So it was, even though, so I grew up, I was born in 1961. So you have to understand, I got put a little bit into context. So I was very lucky to have, middle-class parents were able to that were supportive of me and sent me to jazz education situations when it wasn't what it is now. Jazz education, I went to a Bennington jazz program in 1976 when it's crazy to think, but I was 14 years old. And the teachers were, it was put together by Jimmy Owens and Chris White, but you have to understand, teachers were Andrew Hill, Larry Young.
It's just unreal. It's unreal.
Wait, let me finish this. Let me just tell you where I'm going with this. Ernie Wilkins, Ray Copeland, Billy Cobham came up for a week. Jimmy Jufrey was there. Jackie Byard was there. Beaver Harris. We were being introduced. Now, all these people, and then the next year I went to Creative Music Studio, and there, I got to play music at 15 years old with Carla Bley, George Russell, Leo Smith. Cage came up to hang out. Abdullah Ibrahim, then known as Dollar Brand, was there. And I'm hearing both going to see things like, the Art Ensemble and Sam Rivers and Oliver Lake. And I'm also going to hear Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers and Dexter Gordon when he came back and situations like that. And my teachers were big band players who came up playing with, people that knew Bird and met Lester Young and Billie Holiday when they were young. So I grew up in a time when all this great American culture was bubbling. And let me add, I grew up in Berkeley, the first integrated school system. I went to Black Panther summer camp, went to Malcolm X Elementary School. I grew up in a time where inclusivity was the word of the day and melding of cultures. And the music we listened to and danced to was P-Funk and Ohio Players and Stevie Wonder. So I came up in a time when, first of all, the idea was this is one beautiful America. Now, little do we know we were living in an incredible bubble. I actually thought the world was like that. So let me put this, and the reason I say this is because I want to mention that my older teachers, they worked for a living. Like, I understood they were broke musicians, but my teacher trumpet teacher owned a building that he rented out part of. And it was clear that if you had a certain skill set, you were paid for that. And I joined the union as soon as I got to New York City. And it became clear that part of what we do, this is our living. In fact, I was just thinking about this today. It's funny you brought this up. Because I was thinking about this. Like, I raised 2 children improvising. And even though the stuff that eventually gave me the ability to get a house were things like doing movie scores and things like that, it was with John Lurie and Hal Wilner. I mean, it was my work as an improvising arranger that allowed me to get these jobs. I wasn't some guy who went to movie school or film school. I was a guy that played in bands that knew how to write arrangements, and people said, "Oh, can you do this?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" But it was all that experience I got came from improvising live music. So I was always it was always part of my philosophy that this is what I do to pay my rent, this is what I do to feed my children. I always used to tell people, I said, listen, man, if you can't eat, it's going to be really hard to be alive. And if you're not alive, it's really hard to play music. I guarantee you. I've noticed this. Like the people who aren't alive are not playing music. It's kind of an observation I made a long time ago.
Do you have a story from Beaver or one of these guys who was uncompromisable about how to advocate and how to sing for your supper? Because, I mean, you know, you're a little bit older than me, but I mean, basically, you know, it's very clear to me that a musician used to be seen, and I'm talking about a cat who was on the bandstand, and I give you mad props for, you know, arranging movie scores and things, because that's ultimately how you can pay for your kids' college and things like that. But I mean, like, you know, there was a period of time where Dizzy, Beaver Harris, Bobby Hutcherson, I mean, you know, these guys weren't millionaires, Miles. They probably should have been, but they lived pretty well because musicians were seen as professionals. And I just feel like I mean, I'm not even talking about you personally. I'm just talking about why we've gotten to a point in our society where music is seen as a musician's gift to the world. I mean, there's no doubt coming out of the pandemic, it was already very under-prioritized to begin with. I don't even know where to go from here. I'm just trying to get for you to talk to younger cats the way Jimmy and Jufrey, all these cats talk to you. What would you say? Because the paradigm...
Make sure... Okay, here's the deal. You don't... It's very simple. You try not to give it away. I can't say you don't give it away, because even and I'm going to be blunt about this, like when I started Sex Mob, Michael Dorff had a thing called the late night hang, and he paid $100 cash and beer. And I was wanting to learn to play the slide trumpet better, so I decided I was going to put together a band where I would only play the slide trumpet. That's how Sex Mob started. Sex Mob started basically as a way to like play the slide trumpet and see what I could do with it. And I remember Bob Stewart coming down and saying to me, Stephen, I don't understand why you're doing this. Because he admonished me because I was playing for $100. Now people, of course, you know, are paying for tips. But this was like, you know, 25 years ago. And he said, look, you're a professional musician. Why are you doing this? And I said, you know, I explained to him, I said, well, Bob, there's an ulterior motive to this. This is like, I feel like I'm being paid $100 as opposed to renting a rehearsal space.
That's
know?
Right.
Because,
right.
You know, so so there are times when you need to maybe break that idea of always being paid your due, because if you have an ulterior goal, and my ultimate goal was like, I want to learn how to play this instrument. I can't even really play that well yet. So let me, as opposed to like jamming with my friends or getting a rehearsal space, let me play this gig where everyone makes $25 and we drink some beer. And of course, what ended up happening is like, I have a band that's probably, I mean, as far as working bands, I don't know if there's another band that's been together 25 years that plays together the way we do. Not many bands have done that, you know, and so ultimately, that was an investment I made and a decision I made. But the point is, I'm trying to get at is, and you know, I will tell a story. Frank West, I heard about Frank West, and some guy was on the bus complaining about all these $25 gigs. He was complaining, and Frank just turned to him and said, well, that's because you're a $25 okay? And the point is, if you let yourself do that, that's what you're going to become.
That's a great point. Tell me a little bit about, like, this is so interesting with the Sex Mob, like, regardless of the money, what was the concept of that band when you first started doing those free beer and $100?
Right. The concept was, no one except for me, no one's still done what I've done on the slide trumpet. I mean, I'm not going to do this like I'm to my home, but this is like true innovation. Like no one's ever done.
Dude, this is the show to do it, man. You can go nuts, man. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to say, like, no one's ever, like, talking about, like, innovating on a brass instrument. Well, when you start from zero, it's pretty easy to innovate. So when I started it, I couldn't even make it through a second set. I'd be, like, spitting dust the second set, just like, so the idea was, let me learn how, because the idea was, like, I'm not going to bring a regular trumpet. I'm just going to bring a slide trumpet, and I got to learn how to play this. So that was and what happened was, and I was like any band from the downtown era, I had brought in my compositions and these things we were playing. And at the time I was starting to get I started to do some film scores, and the way I learned to do film scores was this is before the internet, and I just would go and buy used soundtrack LPs and listen to them. I'm like, well, that's the same way I learned how to do jazz and everything else. I just listen to music, and if there's something I like, I'd figure it out. You're like, okay, what's that? Okay, someone wrote this on a film score. What were they doing? So I was listening to a James Bond film score, and I said, you know what? This is a cool little cue. Let me write this cue out, and we'll play it. It was a cue called Bond with Bongos from The Spy Who Loved Me. And
wow.
It's just like this kind of bongo riff, and the bass like, dude. It was actually all trombones going, boom, and then kind of like boom, 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 keeps riffing, and suddenly it's like so we're playing it, and we get to that part, the bar, it just explodes, man. It was like, yeah! And I suddenly went like, wait a second, I'm playing the slide trumpet just as badly as I was on the last song, and now people are screaming. What happened? Like, because I really couldn't play the instrument very well. I mean, I could play a little bit. And I said, oh, I played something that people recognize, and it means something to them. And that's when the light went off. Like, yeah, let me use this band as a way to kind of abstract things, and boom, give people something they know, and they get this beautiful payoff, and they're like, man, I dig this abstract stuff, because guess where it takes you? You go down this road, and you get to, like, something we really love. And that was kind of the beginning of the Sex Mob thought. And yeah, but I want to go back.
Go ahead, man.
Yeah. Of people getting paid.
Yeah.
Because all my teachers were professional musicians, and they just said to me, Jimmy Owens was another guy who was really adamant about the business of music, and that you have to. The thing is, if you're giving it away, then you're not going to get paid. So again, you have to figure it out what it means for your generation. What I always tell young people is, I started playing professionally young. I wasn't great, but I had a good ear for music and a good sound. And I didn't know much about harmony, but I had a good rhythm and good melodies. And I like the fact you said I've been playing melodies all these years, because that's kind of what I've always done. And my trumpet teacher, who had come through like the end of the big band era, he had done the classic Woody Herman band with the Candoli brothers and Shelly Manne and Bud Shank and all those guys.
What was this cat's name, man?
John Coppola. He wrote a song
Sick.
called Cousins that stayed in the Woody Herman book till the end.
Wow.
Then he was in Kenton's band when Maynard was in the band, and Lee Konitz and those guys. He played in Billy Mays' band with Gazzo. He was really from that true jazz era. And he knew how much, and he was very open. He knew how much I loved Lester Bowie and Don Cherry, because that's who I dug in 11th and 12th grade. Those were my guys.
I love it, man. Your ears were wide open, man.
Yeah. But that's also who was touring. I mean, the trumpet players I heard live were Eddie Henderson, who lived local. Freddie Hubbard used to come through a lot. Lester Bowie and Don Cherry. Those were the guys on the road when I grew up. So that's who you'd hear. I'd go to Keystone Corner, and those were the trumpet players. And he knew that's kind of where my ears were. And he said to me, you really want to do this for a living, don't you? I said, yeah, man. He looked at me and goes, learn to play the synthesizer. Because for a guy like him who came up, even though he did play with Sly, he had played with Sly when Sly was a DJ, was writing his own little jingles and stuff. He used to do that stuff with Sly. And so he had some connection to the younger generation, but he was still a musician from an era that didn't exist anymore. You know what I'm saying? He was a musician. Like if you came up and you had played in sections of Conrad Gazzo and the Canzoli Brothers and Maynard and Al Killian. Al Killian was in Charlie Barnett's band when he first joined. I don't know if you know who that was, but Al Killian was one of the greatest trumpet players in history. He died. He was murdered on the road, but he had a fantastic feature with Duke Ellington called Trumpets No End. He was really one of the greatest trumpet players ever. So this guy, and you can imagine, well, what does that feel like in 1979 when that's what your world is? You look around and you say, my world doesn't exist anymore. But so he was basically telling me, I don't know how you're going to be able to do this. And guess what? I was able to do it. So I tell young people, I don't know how you're going to do it, but people told me I couldn't do it, and I did it. So there is an answer out there. But if you don't get paid, it's interesting, though. I mean, I see people like the Westerlies who do things like they have LLCs, and they, you put you instead of buying the CD, you do a donation. So I don't know how they, now they're doing well for themselves, but it got them somewhere. But young people are definitely thinking different now. They're forced to, and you have to be creative about it. And I see a lot of people, figuring out other ways that we wouldn't even think of. My whole thing has always been pay me. And I'm kind of, people at the union know me about this, because I've told people, like one time we did a session, it came out on a live date, and Rufus Wainwright wanted to put it out, and his management wrote, and I was MD, and the management wrote, we want to pay all the musicians $175, and we own this in perpetuity. Musicians were calling me and this whole thing, we own the rights, astral rights forever. Right. And I just called them up, and I said, I'm sorry, these are local 802 members, and you can't do, and then this is, you can't do this. And they said, okay, no, we didn't realize that. We thought you were English musicians because it was recorded in Europe. He said, well, we'll pay local 802 scale. I said, no, everyone's going to be paid double scale. And they said, well, no, you'll be paid double scale because you're the leader. I said, no, I know I get paid double scale. That's the law. I said, everyone gets paid double scale. They said, well, we don't know. And I said, okay, well, it's fine. Just erase the tracks and re-record them with Rufus's band. That's fine. I don't care. We don't care. And guess what? They paid everybody double scale.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember? Obviously you weren't. Can you talk about a formative moment in Berkeley, especially when you were really young and maybe less secure, when you had to? I only bring this up because I've been. This is a long story, but the point is that there's a documentary on Stan Getz being made, and I've done about 4 dozen interviews, 44 minutes with Herb Albert, Creed Taylor, Jack, everybody. A lot of it's audio, but, the first producer was a flake, and he wanted me to just sign over the rights to all the material to him. And now it's in the hands of Nick Getz, who's Stan's son from his second marriage to Monica. And, I sent him my Huey Lewis interview about Stan because Huey was a fanatic. His dad was a huge big band fan, and Stan played music, played on one of the News's tracks in 87. So, they already got something for free, and they're like, can you send over that Herb Albert 44-minute interview? And I was like, I'm like, guys, fellas, I just, before we go any further, I need something in writing about what my role is here. And right. And everybody just wants crap. Also, I know that I'm sitting on gold with this Herb. They could put it in a sizzle reel for some promo and make a couple $100,000 because of the stuff on there. But it continually comes down to this. I guess I'm asking you for some fortitude, because part of me is like, I do want to be involved with this mission. I love Stan, and right. He was a sociopath, but whatever. He was a genius, and dude. And I want to be involved, but I also don't want to give away. I'm just going to stand my ground,
Yeah, well, you have to make decisions on each thing, and something like that. I always tell people, look, I'll do things for people for free. If there's someone I believe in, they have no money. I have no problem with doing that. The thing is, if there's money to be made, and even at years ago, I remember when people were first producing their own things, I would tell people, look, I'll do this for whatever you have, and this is back when there were record labels. You make it a demo for somebody.
Right.
But if you get signed, I want to get a full a union scale fee, and people would be. But I would always ask for that, and one of the only people that ever kind of came back and paid us more money was a Noni, formerly known as Anthony from Anthony and the Johnsons. And she produced her first album, and we played on it, my horn section, and Louis was playing guitar. We cut it live, and Noni paid us on her personal checkbook. And then Noni ended up winning that giant prize in London for, whatever that is, for the biggest record of the year, their favorite record, and started making all this money. And then Noni sent everyone a check for another full union fee. And but I feel part of it is we need to support our community, and a lot of us. Some people joke, we say we keep passing the same $500 around. Like, seriously. Like
I dig.
And like for instance, like when I did MTO Plays Sly. I mean, Bernie Worrell, I paid him exactly what his wife asked for. But all my friends, whether it was Dean Bowman or Sandra St. Victor or Martha Wainwright or whoever, they said, look, I have $500, and everyone's getting the same amount of money, and it's what they call favored nation. And they said, yeah. But then we laughed because then someone else called me for their record, and they paid me that $500 right back. It's like we all keep. And
it's so great.
But we are paying each other.
Sure.
And again, when I first got to New York, there were also more things to do that paid you. Like everyone would either get into like a Latin band or a big band or a wedding band, or there was just you were always paid. You didn't think like, and even the early downtown clubs like clubs like the Danceteria and the Mud Club and Pep Lounge, those were guarantees. Those weren't door gigs.
Exactly, dude. And there was a lot of jingle work too.
Oh yeah, tons of jingle work.
But it was assumed it was a gig. It was a gig. That's the thing. It was a gig.
Yeah. Everything was a gig. Yeah. Even if it was a small guarantee, it was a guarantee. And then it became the door, and then it became 80% of the door, and then it became 75% of the door, and then it became 60% of the door, and then it was 60% of the door, but anything that gets paid with a credit card, we take 4% of that. And now it's people like passing the hat. And that's kind of where I when it got to the passing the hat thing, that's where I was like, I just, like Rockwood Cafe and places like that, Rockwood Music Hall. The people I used to hang out with my friends outside, and they say, why don't you walk in? Why don't you come in? I said, I don't go in that place. And they say, why? And I said, I don't want.
Yes, dude. Me too, man.
I don't want. No, I said, I don't want them to say a professional musician walked in there. You guys can walk in there. I'm a professional musician.
Wow.
You guys are my friends. I'll hang on the sidewalk and we'll shoot the shit and whatnot. But now, yes, I have played with the Rockwood since, and every time it's like someone pays me out of their own pocket. It's like, well, you want to pay me to play at the Rockwood? I'll do it because now I'm getting paid. And some people then there are ticketed events there now and things like that. And I understand that's what people need to do, but someone was making money off of that, so they were able to build 3 more Rockwood music halls off of people passing the hat. Like, the idea is people are making money off of this stuff, so musicians have to be willing to say, you have to be willing to say no. I'll tell you something, Spanish Fly, the first time we were, our tuba player, Marcus Rojas, he also is very influential with me. We were best friends when we still are, but when we were young and we lived in the same apartment building, and we were constantly talking about, we knew a lot of people who were broke legends, and we were like, that's not where we're going. And you look at a cat like Lester Bowie. Lester Bowie was, Lester Bowie bought new cars. Lester Bowie, lived a good. There's a way to play any kind of music. If you were smart, you could get paid to do it. And Lester was always, had Lexus, he always, we knew it was possible. And the first time they offered us a big gig in Europe at the South Belgium Festival, we turned it down. We told them it wasn't enough money. Wow. And guess what? They came back. Yeah, and they came back the next year and offered us twice the money, and we did it. But you have to be willing to say no, or otherwise you're gonna be a $25. You know what I'm saying?
Frank West, man, unbelievable.
Frank West.
I mean, having a ball here with Stephen Bernstein. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I'm going to put this in for you. Pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
I think maybe the greatest impact that I think any of us are subject to is the honest sincerity of a child. When a child is so caught in a dream that he or she is fully unaware of all of the abrasive facets of a gamble that we take and the courage that it demands, to be able to participate in something that we really don't understand the structure and how it truly functions behind our back. Those who are still originally artists at the core are aware of that child because they're similar to that child. They are still the same. And I think it's a matter of time for each and every artist in every field of endeavor, how long it takes for he or she, prior to their giving up their devotion and really beginning to focus their attention on survival. And in slang, that's called playing the game, you see. When a child is not playing the game, but has eyes that are twinkling with love and with respect and admiration, it's difficult for an older individual.
I found it.
Well, we didn't get to the end of that. You want to take a guess at who that is?
No, a name with the words with the really, he stretches out his vowels, and it's with this kind of accent that's so familiar.
I know. I'm wondering. He was a spirit uncle to me. He was actually my first guest on my show 10 years ago, and we just lost him. That was Pat Martino.
Oh, I actually did not know Pat Martino's voice, but knowing what I know about Pat Martino, it makes a lot of sense what he's saying.
Well, what he wound up saying was that he had that experience of the eyes of a child when he wound up moving. He went to New York with Charlie Erlin, but he stayed with Les Paul in New Jersey for a while, and when he met Les Paul for the first time, it was like that.
Right.
And I just wanted you to talk, because that's to me. You talk about, there's this one thing I want you to go further on this, the tincture of time. And it's talking about, I realize more and more on my journey that I'm a healer as well, because in these interviews, especially with the older cats, the ability to mention names, to bring things up, to have them remember, to have them talk about stuff they haven't either ever talked about or haven't thought about since that time. They walk away with gratitude and healing.
Yes.
I just feel like I just wanted you to talk a little bit about your father, and then ultimately the ability for you. Like you said, you've improvised and supported your children through improvisation, but you're also a healer, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny, like, I always want to step back a little bit from calling myself a healer, because sometimes people go, "Wow, what are you saying?"
I didn't call you a shaman. I just called you a healer. Yeah.
No. I understand. I'm just doing a little.
Yeah, I dig.
We all have our own way of, like,
I dig.
Of the word, I guess I call it now, is presenting to the world. And you have to understand something. Like, so my first tours were with the Flying Karamazov Brothers.
No.
And yeah,
that is sick.
Yeah, so I was around, and they were connected to the Eugene Country Fair, to both the Ken Kesey world and the greater Grateful Dead.
Absolutely, man.
So I was around people doing crystal healing and all these kind of things, and going to sweat lodges with the Blackfoot Indians in Montana. When I'm 19 years old. Now I grew up in Berkeley, around this kind of stuff in general anyway. It was part of the culture, and there's always been this idea of alternate healing, and about basically, maybe it was some hippie stuff, but we were hoping to, like, bring goodness to the world and help people out. Now, tinctures of time, sometimes my dad would say something, say, like, everyone used to go to my dad all the musicians and everyone, because he's a doctor, and I think it's can so-and-so call you, can so-and-so. And they sometimes say with certain things as well, that's just a tincture of time. There's nothing we can do about this. Like, this is something that's going to heal itself. But I always thought that was a great tincture. A tincture of time was a phrase with his great Bayonne accent. A tincture of time.
Wait, so I just want to be clear, though. He was basically saying there's no Western medicine remedy for this. It's just going to take time.
Right, exactly.
Dig.
So, like, basically saying, like, don't worry.
Right.
Like,
right.
Lead your life,
right.
and time, and that's the way this is going to heal.
Bayonne, baby.
So Bayonne.
Yeah, man,
baby.
I love that.
And
oh man.
And then healer, transformer, whatever you want to call it. I remember someone who was a bit acerbic, kind of making fun of my liner notes, the first MTO record, because I talked about, like, we used to play these Monday nights, and literally, like, having, like, some 21-year-old college girl come up who'd never really heard live music, that kind of live instrumental music, saying, like, I was weeping because it never had that kind of experience, or someone bringing their grandmother who's, like, hearing music from the 20s that we're playing, and I see the smile on their face but beyond the smile, when you see, like, someone in their 80s kind of recognize this music they heard when they were 20 years old, it's very powerful. So I was very clear to me that part of what we did was transform people. And I always say that Henry Butler and I, when we talk, one of the reasons that Henry and I got along so well, we always felt our job is to transform the room. Our job, and that's what a musician's job is. And there's a story I like to tell about. Roswell Rudd was another great healer and a transformer of things. Yeah. And Roswell was a very good friend of mine, and I was out of town at Charlie Hayden's memorial, and I was asking him about it. And he said, it was at town hall, and he said, Roswell was so beautiful. He said there were so many fine musicians, and everyone played so well. He goes, but when your friend Henry played, he changed the molecules in the room. Now dig that. It's
transforming the room to Bernstein. That's exactly what it is.
And I think and I'm just going to get at something, and it's going to sound a little weird.
Go for it, man.
But there's a lot of people coming through the jazz education system now, and they're learning to play all these things that are really, really excellent and really well played, thought out, performed, and executed in a really fine how, it's just excellent, just really. But to me, which is all great, and that's part of what music is, because there's a science of music and there's a physicality to it, music. But ultimately, the power of vibrations and the power of making people feel something is what I am doing this for. And I'm not even really interested in my notes or any of that kind of that stuff. My interest is how are people being moved by this? How is the audience, what are we doing for them? What is this? And that's really, and I think it's very hard. And I think people will all eventually get there given the opportunity. But, the power of vibration, we are dealing with vibrations here. Now, if you take vibrations and you analyze them and you put them on a piece of paper, they become notes. But that's only afterwards. They're not notes. They're vibrations. And they're coming from one human being. And guess what? They're being absorbed by another human being. So ultimately, what we're playing is obviously not a note. And it's not even what we're playing. It's what's being absorbed by the person experiencing it. That's what we're playing.
Just poetry right there. The truth is that I tend to go, the music that I tend to go attend live, I may have a tincture in time where I'm not, I'm in dis-ease. There's nothing physically wrong with me. My body's in dis-ease. I don't feel great, but like your dad said, it's just going to take some time. And that music, I get into descarga. There's like a spiritual release coming out of
absolutely.
And I walk away, and I'm not saying weeks, but for days, I feel healed. I just feel healed. I'm not a scientist. I just wish it was more part of we are in such a technicality and facility chops driven kind of mood these days, and it's like, I mean, Hampton Hawes, Joe Sample, those guys were banging. They were banging pianos back into tune, but you'd walk out of there healed. I mean, to me, it was like, that's what it's about, man. Do you feel like, how in your live performances, I mean, do you try to just go there? There's nothing I like more than seeing people playing beyond what they know, taking chances. And I just wonder if you can talk about any of these amalgamations or these bands that you're in. Like, I see people sometimes that there's a formula trip, they sort of ease into it. I want people feeling the burn and the urgency from minute one, note one. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how you try to transform a room, the Bernstein Manifesto.
Well, the way I do it is, it's interesting. So first of all, so the Art Ensemble Chicago used to start, and they would all face the east, and it was a ritual. So I like having a ritual start, and all my bands have a ritualistic way to both start and end their sets. And so with Sex Mob, there's one of two songs we start with, and with MTO, we always start with the same song. None of these songs are ever played the same, ever. In fact, the song we played at MTO is like the one song. It's very interesting. There's no arrangement of it. Eventually, I added like one chorus of like a three reeds kind of solely, and then there was a second chorus added after about a couple of years, and then after about 18 or 19 years, I added a third chorus of brass written. Otherwise, it's completely in the moment. And the way it happens is the room tells us what the arrangement will be. Do you understand?
Totally.
And so,
yep.
So the problem with I love fantastic written arrangements, man. They're especially when they're well crafted. You go like, wow, fantastic. It's well played. It's well crafted. But it's always, the idea is, that's what it is. They're playing, for the people eating. If you're playing for people dancing, if you're playing for listening, it's going to be that. My thing is, wherever we are and whoever's listening to us, the environment, the audience is going to let us, but you have to have trust. You have to trust that that's possible. Your musicians have to trust that we can do this. Your musicians have to trust, you have to be willing to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people don't understand or don't like the idea. A lot of them don't like the idea of failure. I'm fine with the idea of failure. Because failure is life. Music is life. Music is not sport. Music is not a sport that you're good at. Music is life. And life is tragedy and beauty and failure and triumph. And if that's what it's all about. And that, to me, again, it's just, okay, and let me preface this all by saying, or not what's the post this, that this is me. I'm saying for me. I'm not saying for
this is
anyone.
your interview, bro. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, but I'm not trying to speak for things. This is like an ultimate, this is a law.
No, absolutely not.
No. I'm not Pythagoras. It's not the Pythagorean
no, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. This is the Bernstein Manifesto.
Right.
Yeah.
This is how I do it. And so I always have a way we're going to start. I don't know where it's going to go, and that's what we do. And for instance, I also almost always bring a new song. And we don't, it's never been rehearsed. I pass it out on the gig.
Wow.
And I tell the audience, I say, hey, this could really be a failure, but let's see what we get. And the audience, of course, loves it, because if they come to see me, they know that's going to happen. And oftentimes, that's what the real magic is. The very first time these guys look in the chart and trying to figure out, wow, what's the song going to be,
I love it.
And, even just like I'm doing I played a little 65th birthday party for my friends in the backyard. And I had a great band, and I brought three or four charts they'd never seen, including an awesome Richard Thompson song. Now, I don't know anything about Richard Thompson, but this guy loved Richard Thompson. I know his son, Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
I know his ex-wife, Linda. And I called up Teddy. I said, Teddy, man, this guy loves your dad. I don't know anything about your dad, man. What are some songs And it's funny because the songs he suggested I actually ended up not doing, but I listened to them. And then another friend of mine was playing, said, well, check out this song. And so, and we're just and all the guys and gals, I say guys in a general sense, all the musicians that play with me, are people who are comfortable with this. So they know they're going to show up, and you got to be. You can't. You don't. No one's going to. If I hire someone who's never played with me, I say, look, don't take this gig if you're not willing to be in a situation where you might not know what's going on, because that's what's going to have to happen. You know, that's how my music works. Like, I know what's going on, but I know what's going on right in the second it's happening, not before. Like, so trust that, like, you know, you could be in a situation, because there are like certain kind of ensembles where that's obviously not the philosophy. The philosophy is, you know what's going on, you know how long the song is, you know where it's going to go, who's going to get the solo.
Yeah, I wind up falling asleep at those shows.
Well, you know, we're not going to go there, right?
No, I'm just saying, but it's
right?
not.
No,
I mean, I love
explain.
explain why it is so great to fall on your face and fail, please.
Because that is what's missing from the digital world.
Right. That's right. You nailed it.
What's missing. What's missing is the human experience of, like, we're doing this, you're here, and this might not work. And that's like, you can't, and to be honest, you can't even get that off like a Zoom concert. It's just, you can't. It's too weird because it's being translated through the computer, the little sound coming out of there. You know, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's like, it can only be, I feel, it can only be experienced when you're in the room with the person, and there's this stuff, and kind of, it's just happening. And that's what, you know, that's the beauty of live music. That's why it's life. You know, a friend of mine once said, and I don't want to get this racial thing, but I'm going to have to just go there.
That's all right.
And we were talking about, like people know when they hire, you know, I do a lot. I've been on over 600 records.
Right.
And I make a lot of records, and people hire me for both, for you know, for writing horn arrangements or playing solos. And I tell people, and now, I don't know if you ever seen my brass band stuff I was putting up during the height of the pandemic. At about midnight, I would create a 94-second brass band piece on this funny little app called, I don't know what it's called, some crap. But it's like the thing where, like, you get the little boxes, and I would, because I'm a late night person, and I miss creating at night. So I say at midnight I'm gonna start a song, and I want to be done by 2 a.m. because Mannix is on it too. I love the theme song to Mannix. I always want to catch the theme, and I never make it till 3 a.m. But I like the first 15 minutes.
Dude, you're on fire right now. It's only like 3 p.m. You're on fire.
But so where am I getting at? This thing about talking about being willing to make mistakes. When people hire me and they play a solo, I'll say I love this, and I love the missed note, and I said, you know, that's how I play. And I tell them, if you really want me to, like, I will fix that note. But if you're cool with it, I'm cool with it, because that's who I am. Like I said to them, if there's no missed notes, how's anyone gonna know it's me? It's like anybody can practice to play the stuff right.
I dig.
You know, you practice enough, I guarantee you will play it right. I mean, it may take a long time for those who are less talented, but you will eventually figure out how to play things right. But to play things like only each of us has that ability. So if you're hiring me, that missed note, that's me. That's who you got there. And even when we're doing arrangements, when there's this one, when I made the Henry Butler record, there's the only record I ever did with like an outside producer, and I never worked with him, and I wasn't the mixing, and they auto-tune like Peter's soprano solo. It's not solo, just like a little fill on this one 4-note thing. And of course, Peter Applebaum's a genius, and he's putting those pitches very much on purpose in that place. You know,
absolutely.
And and of course, it was not my record. Someone else was producing it. I was like, okay, what am I going to do, man? I got other battles. I got bigger battles to fight than that. But it was just so funny because it's suddenly like, I remember playing the mix to someone, and he goes, well, it sounds good, but it sounds like a Randy Newman record. I'm like, yeah, I know, man. It's like, and because my thing is like, put all the mistakes like up front. In fact, the song that's like a little single for the Tinctures in Time, and there's a video for. Matt Munster is playing like this kind of Discarga style, somewhere in between African and Afro-Cuban and P-Funk, like guitar part, that repeats over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's this one part where I must be in a flat key, like I think it must be an E flat or something. He hits, his finger touches a strong, like, one of the other strings, whether it's A or B, whatever. It's a string that's not the key, and it just rings out. It's like jarring, and it would be so easy to just replace that and go, because the thing repeated over and over again. And I said, no, man. I called Matt and said, it's okay if I leave it in? He goes, what's your record? I said, yeah. I said, every time I hear it, it bothers me, and I want to keep it there, because here's why. Let me tell you something, Jake.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, no one's ever going to hear a wrong note again.
You know what? I mean, David Spinoza on Right Place, Wrong Time, Arif Mardin and Dr. John, he was going to a jingle. They said, hey, we need a guitar solo on this tune. And he comes in, he tunes up, he plays, hits a clam, and he's like, I got to do that again. They're like, nope, you're done. It's perfect. And then it turned out to be, that was the hit tune. I mean, I just think that, to me, what you said earlier, music is life. Life is messy. Life is not perfect. It's your life. And I mean, the recording thing is like, to me, I don't know, imperfection is perfect. It's really nice to hear somebody who actually has done so much work at the professional level, being so fearless. I just, I really want to ask you about these, how realistic, and I apologize if you've already been doing it, but in these different products that you're these different albums, how much of this, the music itself, like if I was going to see a show, how much of it is a direct representation? Like, am I going to see, I already know the answer to this, but, are the songs played exactly off the record, or are they different every time? You never play the same song the same way once.
Well, it's very interesting. It's good. Yes, that's totally true.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that the first record, so Tinctures in Time, I'm really, really proud of this record, because it's the first time I've ever written original music for this ensemble. And I feel like, my arrangements are original music, but they're original music inspired by these other songs. And in fact, all my music is inspired by other songs. But I meant on this record, I purposefully said, okay, well, I'm not going to play other people's melodies, and I'm just going to kind of create my own melodies, but it's all inspired by, everything's inspired by something, and especially someone like me who's played so much music and recorded so much music and constantly writes so much music for arrangements of this and this. Everything is everything. I mean, it's all in there. I mean, how
Donny Hathaway right there. Yeah.
Everything is everything.
That's
and there's
sick.
plenty of Donny Hathaway in my music.
Love
I
him,
mean,
man. Jesus.
I don't know if you know this, but Donny, do you know about the record with Donny Hathaway and playing with the Woody Herman Band?
Yeah, totally. The late Phil Upchurch was on it. It's the sickest, funkiest stuff ever, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fly. They do that song. What was it? Fly Away. What was it called? They cover his tune.
Yeah. Whatever. Right. They cover.
I'm Flying.
Whatever that.
Why is it? I can't remember what it's
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is, like, people say Donny Hathaway. They don't. Donny Hathaway wrote his own horn arrangements. Yeah. Donny Hathaway came from jazz. Everything came from jazz at a certain point until jazz stopped being so much part of popular culture. But for a long time, there was no such thing as a funk musician. There wasn't even such. I tell people talk about, like, Ringo's drumming and Charlie Watts' drumming and John Bonn's drumming. I said, well, those guys weren't rock drummers, because there was no such thing as a rock drummer until they did that.
Absolutely. No, by the way, Flying Easy is the name of the tune.
Right, Flying Easy.
No, I was going to say that the word funk was not in the lexicon until probably after the Headhunters album in '73. They'd say, let's play a funky blues. But all Greg Errico, Mike Shreve, David Garibaldi, Billy Kreutzmann, all those guys that wound up playing quote-unquote psychedelic rock, they were all jazzers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And because that's the only thing you could do if you were into music. There wasn't anything else. I mean, that's what music was. And then more music came, and they gave that music a different name, But it all comes from Jelly Roll Morton. That's the other thing. Like, everything comes from Jelly Roll Morton and Louis Armstrong. Everything, including. And I used to not know this, I had an amazing talk one time. I was doing a show at, I don't know if it was Royal Albert Hall or one of those halls in London, big Hal Wilmer show, and Billy Bragg was on it. We were hanging out talking, and he was telling me his whole thing about, because he's also a musicologist. And now, I don't know if you know this. You know about skiffle music, this whole story about
No, I know. Hit me.
Okay, this is some really deep stuff that I didn't know about. So skiffle music, there's something called skiffle music from the 20s, which is a kind of very much like a kind of very rugged form of blues. You heard, and there's some records you'll see where it's referred to as skiffle. But then what happened was, when there was what they called the trad jazz situation in London,
right, with
these guys, Humphrey, Littleton, and all these guys, that was big music in London. It was kind of, and it was post-war, post World War II, and this was kind of about as loose as the English people got. They weren't really, their culture, and especially not only as a very kind of rigid culture, but they just been through World War II and got the shit bombed out of them, So, England was kind of, wasn't like, it certainly was not like, everyone jumping around like, doing that stuff. So this music was very much a music of release. And they were doing a record date, and they used to do something they would call a skiffle set in the middle to rest their chops, where the brass players would switch to like wash tub bass and comb, playing a comb and tissue paper, and kind of like, but they were still like playing like Louis Armstrong style songs and Jelly Roll songs and maybe some Lead Belly songs, like whatever repertoire they had, because it's a gig, right? So they were at a recording date, and there's a song. I wish I was better at names. It's a very famous story that these guys had this some time left, and they said, let's cut a few of those skiffle songs. So they cut one called Rock City Line, right? Rock Bottom Line, Rock City Line.
Right. Rock Island Line, yeah.
Rock Island Line. It's right. So what happened was, this is the way Billy Bragg tells me the story. The Rock Around the Clock movie came out in England. It was a huge hit. Bill Haley and everything, and the guys at the record store were like, didn't we just make a record with the word rock in it? They said, yeah. I was like, well, let's start pumping it on the radio, because they're like, kids are loving this rock and roll thing, Rock Around the Clock. We got a song with the word rock in it. And that song became a giant hit. Then there were skiffle clubs all around, because you only needed 3 chords. They would sell these special skiffle guitars where they had little finger notches or markings where you can put the 3 chords you needed for these skiffle songs.
I love this.
All these simple songs.
Yeah.
Now, do you know what bands started skiffle bands? The Beatles.
Yeah, there were Stones and the Beatles, right? Those cats.
The Kinks, the Stones, the Beatles, the Who, Mott the Hoople. They were all
totally. Yeah, absolutely. Sam Cutler was waxing on this back. Yeah, totally.
So all that music, even though you can say, well, how's the Kinks like Louis Armstrong? Because if it wasn't for Louis Armstrong, there would be no Kinks. Because those guys who record that Rock Island Line were guys playing Louis Armstrong's music. Right? It all comes from Louis Armstrong and Jelly Roll. So, I don't know how we started.
It's okay. You know what I want to do? We got it. Let's just let's stop here. Let's do set 2 like in the next week or 2. Is that cool?
Yeah.
I'd love to do another set with you, and we can go a little bit deeper into this stuff, because I'm backed up against another interview. But
good.
But yeah, let's. We were cooking, man. I just love your attitude. I love where you're coming from, and yeah, we'll pick it up soon.
All right, and people, Tinctures in Time, and coming out next, Good Time Music with Cat Russell, and that's the record that really comes from my experiences with Levon Helm and Henry Butler. So for people who are fans of vocal music and some good rocking, those songs with some.
When's that going to drop? When's that coming out?
That is dropping, I believe, January 8th.
All right, well, let's do something. Let's do set 2 before then. I'd love to talk to you more. I mean, you're in all different bags of music, and it all starts with Jelly Roll and Louie, man.
That's right, baby. All right, Jake.
All right, Bernstein. Great to hear you, man.
All right, bye.
Later.